Delhi. She's previously worked in major national newspapers like the Times of India.
In 2005, and that was the year when CNNI
had just started. Rajdeep was the editor-in-chief there. And things from there, from that time to now, things have changed, and change always happens everywhere. Women in the newsroom, I have one point to make.
Why should women journalists be talking about women in the newsroom? Perhaps even a male editor would have been fine in a panel of this nature, so that he understands what women talk about, and when they talk about what they undergo. So talking specifically about how and what women bring on in the newsrooms, I think the gender that we talk about, there's nothing specific in terms of women in the newsroom suffer or undergo which is different from any other space. Be it in boardrooms or in other spaces, it's the same kind of biases that you face on a daily basis. It's about what you bring on the table. That is very, very important. I think as a woman journalist in particular, I feel I have to have that X factor. That X factor that I'm talking about has to be about what you bring on the table, which is different, which is much more than what you have in terms of your male counterparts and others. And that's the reason why I say that my skill sets as someone who understands ground realities, who is a very grounded reporter in the sense of what I pick up, I report, I attribute it to my sources, I second check my facts. That is something that I bring on the table. And of course, as a woman, having been in this profession for 14 years, I can say that if a man can, put in 4 hours, I can do 12. And I would be damn good at my work. I'm extremely hardworking. So if you think that you cannot compete with me in number of hard work, is what I'm saying. If you think that for a male counterpart, I often say that they may be good at certain other aspects in terms of networking, going out for smoke breaks and all. I may not be doing that, but then when it comes to my work, I'm extremely diligent, and what I bring on the table in terms of my skill sets is much more than 10 men combined.
Well, I'll come to your question, which is what is it that we find in terms of the numbers of women in the newsroom. I have found, because I've been in the profession for 20 years, mostly in print newsrooms, I find that we're quite a number in the entry-level jobs where you start as reporters, trainee reporters, up to the level of special correspondent, principal correspondent, special correspondent. But beyond that, when it goes to the middle level and top editorial jobs, the pyramid narrows. It narrows in any case organizationally for men also, but it narrows quite a bit more for women. Now, why does that happen? It happens due to a lot of reasons, also life cycle reasons. A lot of people drop out. A lot of people feel that the profession is not for them. They get something out of it, move on. They don't find it interesting enough because they're being hedged into beats that they're not interested in. Because the editor or somebody in top editorial levels decides that, since you're a woman, you write on fashion, or you write on other things, you may not be interested in that. Like it happened with me in the early years of my career. I started as a city reporter, but then I did work in a weekly magazine where I found willy-nilly because I was told that in a weekly magazine, in a general interest magazine, you have to write on everything. So out of 10 assignments, possibly I would get 1 or 2 political assignments, but the others were all about trends in society, fashion, all of those things. Marya is a good friend. She can tell you that there's nobody more fashion challenged than I am. So it would have been a complete misfit for me. I'm more interested in political economy, real estate, politics, ideology, policy, all of those things. And I would keep pushing back. Finally, I left for another journalistic job. And I actually had to go back to city reporting and then get back into political, then get an entry into political journalism. So I had a back and forth, which I didn't see happening to my male colleagues. The same guys from my own bureau, from my own team, who were with me in city reporting, also got jobs in the same magazine. But they got pretty meaty beats. And they seamlessly went off towards the bureau level. So that is one prejudice that we have to belabor under. The third is, of course, very importantly, childcare, marriage, all of these things. A lot of women do prioritize childcare and other things. Some people can manage with good help. A lot of people can't. We're still waiting for newsrooms to be a little more caring about, and understanding about these issues. And also women to learn how to juggle all of these together. So for me, I think the narrowing of the pyramid goes through these three different reasons.
Thank you. Yes, I endorse what Marya and always be more women in a journalism or a mass comm or a media class. But from the classroom to newsroom, that's where the transition, the journey begins. Of course, Women in Newsroom is a story of a narrative of progress. We have absolutely no inequality when it comes to access of jobs at the entry level. So from classroom to newsroom, yes, one patch. The second is, as Nisthula rightly pointed out, it's growing. Though, as Marya rightly put it, we are much more hardworking, we are much more focused. I especially love to work with women teams because a professional usually does not mix her personal life with her professional life. They're so diligent, they are so focused. But that's where the story ends. Once we want to grow, once we have to get into the decision-making position, as Marya said, instead of 4 hours, we are ready to work 12 hours. But why should we be working for 12 hours? That's one point of inequality. Why have we to establish ourselves? That we are women, we already know, we have had the best education, the best exposure. But that, what Marya said, what Nisthula said, is the reality. We have to work much more harder, and for us, the main concern is also the pay parity, And women in newsroom, like if I'm a leader, if I'm trying to be compassionate towards my colleagues, I could be dubbed as too motherly. And if I'm just going to have a professional relationship, just work, most men, and since it's in Jaipur and I right now happen to be in Ahmedabad and you from Jaipur. So unlike metro cities, women at non-metro places still feel that gender gap. My secretary or my manager could become a sir, but for 20 years I would remain a behenji or a behen or didi or some sort of a weird designation, because male colleagues are still slightly distanced from having women bosses, especially if I'm going to be covering a fashion show or a flower show. Everything's okay. But once we are going to step into the male trajectory and question the male stereotyping of typical patriarchal political coverage, things are going to roll. If I'm going to be in the board, if I'm going to be a functional director, my voice in the boardroom has to be really the softest voice. That's the general perception. And that's the main thing that we, in this century, in this era, have to still discuss about women in newsroom. Shows that everything is not right. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Of course, I would absolutely endorse what Marya and Nisthula and Deepali, they have narrated. In my case, it was a very, although of course I come from Dainik Bhaskar, so you must be thinking it would be a very perpetrating place, you know, full of rhodomontade talks by men and all. Surprisingly, it has never been so with me. In certain arenas, yes, but I would just give you a very different picture. I'm basically not a qualified mass comm journalist. I come from a management background. And way back in 1998, you know, when Dainik Bhaskar had just forayed into Jaipur, of course it was all with a set of everything that you can, you know, accredit to a male bastion, the male journalist and everyone, even the photographer, the photojournalist, the desk people, they were all males. So suddenly this, the top management gives me an opportunity that because you understand, you know, the reader side of it so well, why don't you pick up this job of a journalist? And I was directly made the editor of a career and an education page altogether. So no one, I think, in none of the media houses, I think they can take that kind of, they will have this kind of a risk appetite to offer a management graduate the role and designation of a journalist and venture out with that risk. It is basically because somewhere or the other they have that kind of, you know, a potential to take the risk, and they're more open than maybe the other media houses. And I think they don't believe that women have an X factor. They believe that biologically and professionally, women have a double X factor. Definitely, we are all endowed with it and we should be proud of it. And yes, there are problems. See, it was not for me to foray into the male bastion, you know, the male reportership or anything like that, or photojournalist or anything. It was not difficult to foray into journalism. Very difficult to penetrate the fort of perception that all the... Why is she at all here? She doesn't even know how to speak in Hindi. That was the first narrative that they had. She's not even a journalist. She's not even a mass comm graduate. And then I decided I'm not going to, you know, divert or dilute my energy in explaining to them what I'm capable of. I would rather set an example and deliver, you know, because they were very busy about, you know, cribbing about, you know, why is she there? So let me prove why am I there. And then when it comes to the table, as rightly pointed out by Marya, I think that makes all the difference. Once there is a proof to the pudding, then, you know, there's no looking back. और मैं आपको एक चीज और बताना चाहूंगी कि खबर को ये बिल्कुल पता नहीं होता कि उसको कोई पुरुष पत्रकार कर रहा है या महिला पत्रकार कर रहा है. खबर तो खबर है. The only thing is how you package it, what angles you can give to it. That is what is going to make a difference. I think, why should we always compete with a crime beat, a person who's handling a journal, who's handling a crime beat? Why don't you come up with a story with an absolutely different angle, with an absolutely different angle and imagination and maybe an interpretation that people have not talked about? I don't know whether you have seen, if you're from Jaipur, you must have seen about these installations that were put for the road accident victims. You know, there was a damaged car, with, of course, was put in collaboration with Dainik Bhaskar and RTO together, just to, and with the effigies, of course. Now, why is this? You know, this is because the women are invited, the women journos are invited in that arena of brainstorming. When there is an ideation in the newsrooms, I'm sure most of the students out here who belong to the local colleges or even from Vanasthali, they've done their internship under me and they know what kind of you know, a democratic environment we have. Of course, I'm a little more prejudiced because I have 70% of women journalists working with me. But I always understand one thing, that, you know, there can be a switchover of roles. I never let, a woman reporter cover a Ficky Flow event. I would always give it to a male reporter because I know there is a very different perception. And why not? Why should we actually talk about this gender? That this should be politics should be a gender specific, and the Ficky Flow should be a gender specific issue. Why can't we just start diminishing and taking initiatives ourselves? And I'm sure doing it at little levels, but yes, we do need a support from the top management, and there has to be a kind of a very beautiful environment around, a very congenial environment around. Can you believe that in 1910, Lau Lau was the first, Lau Lau Lesson was the first woman journalist way back in 1910, and she pioneered in science journalism. Can you beat that? How far away we are from that kind of a dream? Let us all, diminish all these barriers which are there. I think all these apprehensions, inhibitions are within us as well. Why can't we just remove this lens? Once we are clear of, of this lens, I'm sure the males would not mind removing that spectacle. They have two lenses, so that's ways. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. It's very motivating to hear you, but I would want to point out two things. This morning, I was looking at three national newspapers in Jaipur. 72% of the front page bylines are men's, right? You say that, yes, Ficky Flow, you send a man. But my question is, why don't we have a female who is a defense editor? Do we have one? Do we have an internal security editor who is a woman? Let's look, yes, it is very nice that 1910, the woman, she lost and pioneered science journalism. It was good, but if you look at the last decade, whether it was New York Times, whether it was Philadelphia Inquirer, I don't want to talk about women editors in India. The maximum editors to lose jobs have been women. So it does not mean if we are so good, and I'm sorry to say, but with the economic slowdown right now sitting on our heads and the tightening of the purses, women would be more victimized because of the economic slowdown in this profession. Because I've heard in the boardroom, I've had weird arguments like, oh, women supplement incomes. They are not the main bread earners. And these are all educated, Ivy League, IIM trained management. And you say that the top management has to, when we have support of the top management. But why can't we women be the top management ourselves? Look at all major newspapers in India right now. How many, you can be a political editor, I could be a political editor or a defense editor or, even the deputy editor-in-chief. How many women actually are the top bosses in national newspapers of India? Not even 6%. I don't want to name newspapers, but the biggest media group to the last one on the IRS scale, number of women editor-in-chief. Does that mean that women are not good enough for the top slot? How many women, except for one national editor, all are chairmen, right? Except for one, how many top managements or editor-in-chiefs in India are women? That's my question.
To add to what Deepali is saying, I think because she has spent many more years than me, so her view would be, talking about that level of editor-in-chiefs. I'm looking at women who have moved beyond covering the women and child development ministries to HRD ministries or social justice, agriculture, to now covering home affairs, Prime Minister's office, the BJP, the Congress, hardcore political beats, and understanding the nuances in policy, in infrastructure ministries such as steel, petroleum, aviation. Yes, we are. We are seeing that. And I'm extremely delighted to say that when I started, I was told you can cover railways. That's in the year 2008. I said, do you think I'll be able to cover railways because, it's policy, it's infrastructure. How do I understand? Like, you'll be able to manage it. But most women in the team were asked to do agriculture, rural development, perhaps. But I'm saying that the change is happening. The fact that you have a Nisthula from the Hindu, a prominent paper, 140-year-old paper. She's the political editor covering the Prime Minister's office, covering the BJP. I cover the BJP and the Prime Minister's office for my channel. I think the change is there, and I'm looking at the brighter side. I have always felt that for young people such as you, nihilism may not be the best thing. I'm saying it again. The change is happening in the newsrooms. And I'm grateful to our seniors who have set that bar, and some of us, and many of us are actually fighting it out. But I would like to specify one thing, that when you have just entered the newsroom, one thing that you will see very distinctly in the manner in which you would function and your male colleague would be functioning is, and that happened with me when I was fresh out of college. I entered, the CNN News 18 newsroom, and I would come in at 8 o'clock, start working and putting in several hours, and a male colleague of mine, fresh from, Stevens, he had a different approach. So he would come and
there are more women in senior editorial positions. And Prerna, you were saying that the news doesn't know if you're male or female. But what I wanted to ask is there such a thing that as a female gaze on the news? Does having women, more women reporters, more women editors, does it change the kind of news or the kind of editorial decisions that media houses get, that people get to do? What actually changes, or how can women sort of bring in their perspective or gaze on the news that's being made?
What I think is that, once a woman enters in a newsroom, I think they also are somewhere bitten by this kind of a perception that no, it will not be accepted. My views would not be accepted. So if you are not buying your own views and your angle to the story, it would be very difficult for you to convince, your editor for a story across this table. But I think the kind of angle, that's what I was talking about, that if you're doing a crime story, let us get something that is beyond the imagination of the Of course, we are diligent. We put in more number of hours and everything. We have a greater exposure. But the point is that are we actually trying to, convince the other side? Not even convince, but are we trying to throw the ideas of that level across the table so that they're convinced to actually take up that kind? Like, of course, like Marya very rightly pointed out that you might come up with the best of ideas and may not execute it. And women are very good at conceiving the ideas, yes, and then completing the ideas as well, and delivering it, because they understand somewhere or the other the pulse. I was just reading about a very interesting research because of my research orientation. So it said that, it's like when women go out for reporting or for taking out the stories, they listen more. The men do not listen, actually. Half thing is that they go with their perceptions, and then, they use half of their auditory senses. And that is why, their news is somewhat incomplete, not really complete. So I think when a woman goes out there, she has a second sense also of intuition and intelligence and whatnot. And she adds a completely different picture and a dimension to whatever she's covering. And you see the kind of environment we have, or in the newsroom where there is a cleaner. I think there's a lot of courtesy and there's a lot of respect. You'll not be able to call names, and you'll not be able to just do anything or say anything like it. But I would like to absolutely agree with Deepali on one thing. And you really try to laugh at the excuses that the male counterparts make about the headaches and the diarrheas and all. I'm so glad that come se come, that is a universal issue that, you know, we are dealing with. That is there, definitely.
I'd like to intervene a little because I do disagree with you on a couple of things. First of all, this whole idea about the female gaze, whether there is a female gaze on the news or how you look at it, is very problematic for me. It's a problematic thing because who is interpreting that gaze? You know, it's a male editor who will tell you कि भाई तुम लड़की हो, तुम ये करो, तुम ये वाले assignment करो, तुम वो करो. Then in that situation, he is defining what the female gaze is, and that's a problematic thing for me. Secondly, I really don't agree that, you know, men don't listen, or as journalists they don't use their auditory powers or whatever. I think they're very competent male colleagues, as there are female colleagues. Thing is that all of us, all four of us, or any of the male journalists who are sitting here, Narendra is here, Praful is here, all of us go into, we are part of a whole, you know, a lot of our baggage comes from who we are. Gender is one part of it. It's not the whole of it. You know, your schooling, your college, what subjects you took, your bent towards becoming certain things, your life experiences. I'll give you a very small example. First time that I won a national election was in 2004, and I went to men where Mulayam Singh Yadav was fighting an election. It's the back of the bulldogs, you know, and it's the roads are bad. The only thing we grow is potatoes, and it's his backyard, and a very feudalistic environment there, and he's the big boss, and he was. I encountered this young functionary from the Samajwadi Party, and he was looking a bit tense. I said, "Kyun bhai, kya hua? Aap itne tense? Why are you looking so tense?" He said, "Look, you know, we have no hotels here, and there are no Western-style loos, so therefore none of the star campaigners want to come and campaign for Netaji." And I started laughing. I said, "Well, you see, at least some star campaigners have come to know what problems women face when they're traveling. You know, if there are no hotels, no decent places to stay, and things like that." So as a woman traveling alone, that is something that melted my experience, and I did a story on that and how entered the story of how just a feudal backyard for Mulayam Singh Yadav that this was. Men can also come up with all of, you know, with their experiences, but it cannot always be that your identity as a woman is the only thing that is informing your journalism.
So I'll just end with 2 lines on this, that the female gaze, you know, all gaze, like you can't differentiate between a male eye and a female eye, but when it comes to stories, whether it was offers or whether whatever financial scams or fake degrees in the contemporary era, it has been women who have exposed it. So I think women in a newsroom always under-promise and over-deliver. That's the takeaway.
It looks like we're running out of time, but there was one question that I really wanted to ask everyone on the panel. So there's this idea of a toolkit that women need to have, it's like a feminist toolkit that women need to have to equip themselves with skills or tools or behaviors that will help them
be successful in their lives. So I just wanted to ask each of you, what do you think women journalists should equip themselves, equip their feminist journalist toolkits with in order to be successful journalists?
Can you hear me? Yes. So I think you should have a woman mentor, someone who you can turn to every now and then. The lady sitting next to me is someone I turn to almost every week. Just call her up and say, if this is a situation, how do I react? And then I get the answer. You have to have a woman who can guide you through, and she should be she should be like really senior to you, and you should just have that faith that the idea of sisterhood should be in a woman who's around, and that's the one for me who says that this is what you have to do in this situation, and you must have a woman mentor for yourself, and I have.
Just taking off from what Marya said, this toolkit, I have always found that
female friends, and this is not just in journalism, in life, having a group of female friends is always a good thing. Once women get over whatever insecurities that are bothering them, they can be the best. They really back you up, which is better than male friends can do for you. And I'm 44, so I can say with a great deal of authority, having lived through a lot more of life than a lot of you here. And the second feminist toolkit is that don't whine, don't whinge. Look at something very, very clearly, with a clear-eyed perspective. Ask if you're in a pickle, you ask yourself, how is it that I can extricate myself from this with dignity intact? And that should be the aim for you. So don't whine about things. It's not attractive, it doesn't help you. And when you go to your editor with a problem, you have a problem, you work out 3 solutions because the editor has no time to listen to anybody's whinging, even a male colleagues. So you go there, you say, this is my problem, these are the 3 possible solutions. This suits you, this suits me, this will suit everybody. And make it a very short meeting and get out of there. So these are the 2 things I would say that
My toolkit, I would say, is that women generally say, I feel this, I think so, I presume. I think women should just believe. We are what we are, and confidence and mentorship from strong senior women, that's the key. Every night, I think, usually it's after midnight that we have a chat, and that keeps that really going on.
Thank you. I would also like to add, yes, you should have a very profound circle of friends and women mentors, but even having a male mentor would not be bad, actually. We should not categorize all male editors and all male reporters as snollygosters and whatever. So what we are supposed to look at is that what best and what is the synergy what we can strike with our skill set and competence set and our journalistic eye. What is the best way forward? And yes, we have to be solution oriented and found circle of friends who can actually tell you, that this is the way out, and don't end in a soup, don't end in a kind of a conflicting situation wherein where you have to really withdraw that way. So all these things really matter a lot.
Thank you so much. I think we're out of time now, but that was a very enriching, very good discussion. Thank you so much. I guess you guys can meet the panelists after the session. They'll be happy to.
Thanks everyone. I would like to invite Mr. Narendra Nath and Ms. Jennifer to come over stage and present the next to the panelists.
भी है
Citylive, a platform to sharing your thoughts. Citylive, a platform to sharing your thoughts. Citylive, a platform to sharing your thoughts. Citylive, a platform to sharing your thoughts.